There's a dangerous lie being repeated out there. Be completely transparent and the world will respect you. It won't work. In a politics guided by reality, not ideals, excessive transparency is an invitation to manipulation. And this is where Machiavelli comes in, like a slap in the face of modern naivete. He understood something that few dare to admit. Power is not born from exposure, but from the control of information. Powerful men don't reveal everything, not because they are dishonest, but because they understand decisions based on real human nature. The world tests weaknesses, the world measures reactions, the world observes needs. And here's the counterintuitive statement: the more you try to appear approachable, the more predictable you become. And predictability is vulnerability. Virtue and fortune favor those who know when to speak, and especially when to remain silent. Is it better to be feared than loved? Perhaps. But above all, avoid being hated, and that requires strategy. The calculated use of force begins with managing one's own image. An appearance of virtue is useful. Excessive exposure is not. Constant adaptability requires understanding that not all truth needs to be public. Have you ever noticed how some people seem untouchable? They don't react. They are not overly justified. They don't explain their plans. They don't show their weaknesses. They understand that information is currency, and that armies of one's own, loyal armies, begin in one's own mind. Today, you'll understand what information powerful men never reveal and why strategic silence is the true secret of authority. And perhaps, by the end of this video, you'll realize that the problem was never a lack of strength. It was overexposure. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder you are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. The man who needs applause surrenders his own control to the audience. It may seem like an exaggeration, but it's not. When someone lives seeking approval, they become predictable, and predictability is ammunition in politics guided by reality, not ideals. Machiavelli already warned that decisions based on real human nature require observing how people react to reward. Those who depend on validation always react the same way. They work expecting praise, they speak expecting approval, they post expecting likes, and when the praise doesn't come, they adjust, they mold themselves, they diminish themselves. This creates a pattern, and a pattern is the map of their behavior. The powerful understand that better to be feared than loved doesn't mean spreading fear, but not depending emotionally on the love of others. They savor their victories in silence. Bought a property, stay quiet, closed a big deal, celebrate in private, because virtue and fortune go hand in hand, but excessive ostentation attracts envy and attempts at sabotage. The appearance of virtue is different from constant exposure. The calculated use of force begins with the restraint of one's own vanity. Those who control their own ego build their own loyal armies within their own minds. Now let's look at a practical example. Imagine two businessmen. The first announces every achievement on social media. The second works quietly, invests in solid stocks like energy companies, technology companies, or strategic real estate funds, studies books like Machiavelli's The Prince and Think and Grow Rich. but doesn't comment on anything. When a crisis arises, the first is pressured, held accountable, observed. The second continues to operate invisibly. Constant adaptability requires not depending on the applause of the crowd. Those who need validation accept bad conditions just to maintain their image. They accept a lower salary to appear successful. They accept a mediocre relationship to avoid being alone. And, without realizing it, they begin to live to maintain an appearance of virtue. Machiavelli would say that this is strategic weakness. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, teaches that respect comes from emotional stability. And stability begins when you don't need to prove anything to anyone. There's something curious. The more someone talks about their victories, the less people deeply respect them. It's counterintuitive, but it's true. Decisions based on real human nature show that people value what is rare and silent. Virtù and fortuna favor those who understand that silence is a form of calculated use of force. The powerful man doesn't share every plan because he knows that dispersed energy is diluted power. It's better to be feared than loved, but avoid being hated. And the best way to avoid being hated is not to provoke unnecessarily. Your own loyal armies are built with discretion, not fanfare. When you don't need approval, you become unpredictable. And when you become unpredictable, you gain respect. But there's something even more dangerous than the need for validation. What happens when someone discovers exactly how to provoke you? And that's where the next level of this conversation begins. The common man reacts, the powerful man observes. It seems simple, but it's brutally strategic. When someone provokes you and you react impulsively, you're handing over a complete manual of your nervous system. Machiavelli taught that politics, guided by reality, not ideals, begins with a cold reading of human nature. And human nature loves to test limits. A subtle criticism, a public irony, a sharp comment. If you react, the other person discovers exactly where to press. Decisions based on real human nature show that whoever controls their own emotions controls the environment. Better to be feared than loved, but never to be predictable. The calculated use of force is not about shouting louder, it's about knowing when to say nothing. Virtù and fortuna favor the one who maintains an impassive face while the other loses their composure. Constant adaptability demands strategic coldness. The appearance of virtue may mask anger, but true power is not feeling the need to react, because whoever reacts is always being led. Consider a practical situation. In a work meeting, someone questions your competence in front of others. The natural impulse is to defend yourself immediately, but imagine that you simply listen, take notes, and respond hours later with concrete data, reports, and objective results. Your own loyal armies are not built with shouting, but with silent competence. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that emotional reaction is seen as structural weakness. Machiavelli understood that the end justifies the means when the goal is to maintain authority. And maintaining authority requires stability. A man who explodes loses his aura. A man who remains calm generates strategic discomfort. It's better to be feared than loved, but avoid being hated. And hatred often arises from public humiliation. When you don't react, you create doubt. And doubt generates respect. Unpredictability becomes your invisible shield. Now think beyond the professional environment. In personal relationships, provocations are disguised power tests. A sarcastic comment, an attempt at jealousy, a subtle comparison. If you react, the other person understands your weak point. Decisions based on real human nature indicate that silence can be more intimidating than any speech. Virtù and fortuna reward those who master their own emotions. Calculated use of force also means choosing when to ignore. Constant adaptability requires maturity to understand that not every battle deserves a response. Your own loyal armies begin with a disciplined mind. Machiavelli never taught lack of control, he taught strategy. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, means accepting that the world tests you all the time. And those who fail the emotional test rarely maintain power. But there is something even more delicate than your current triggers. There is what was born from your old wounds, and this, when revealed without strategy, can be used as a weapon against you. There's a modern belief that exposing wounds creates automatic connection. Not always. In politics guided by reality, not ideals, vulnerability without strategy becomes exposed fragility. Machiavelli understood something uncomfortable. Decisions based on real human nature require accepting that not everyone uses information to offer support. Many use it to calculate advantage. When someone indiscriminately shares past traumas, they are offering a detailed manual of where it still hurts, and those who know where it hurts know exactly where to apply pressure. It's better to be feared than loved, but avoid being hated. The powerful man doesn't deny his scars. He chooses who to show them to. Virtù and fortuna walk with those who transform pain into silent strength. Calculated use of force also means knowing that information is power. The appearance of virtue may include sensitivity, but not naivete. Constant adaptability requires maturity to realize that not every ear is trustworthy. Your own loyal armies are built with discernment, not with uncontrolled emotional exposure. Imagine someone recounting in a competitive environment a past experience of serious financial difficulties. It might seem like an inspiring story, but in the wrong hands, it becomes an argument for discrediting them. They've gone bankrupt before. They can't handle pressure. Do you see? Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that the world is not a collective confessional. Machiavelli would never advise revealing strategic weaknesses in public. The end justifies the means when the objective is self-preservation. Decisions based on real human nature teach that respect is born from the perception of strength, not from the constant exposure of pain. This doesn't mean becoming cold or inaccessible. It means selecting the right environment, a therapist, an experienced mentor, a restricted circle of trust. This is different from sharing traumas with opportunistic colleagues or unstable partners. Virtù and fortuna favor those who convert a difficult past into a silent, competitive advantage. There's a subtle difference between authenticity and recklessness. Authenticity is acknowledging your history. Recklessness is handing it over to someone who can use it against you. It's better to be feared than loved, but always avoid being hated. Your own loyal armies are built on selective trust. Constant adaptability requires assessing context before speaking. Calculated use of force also means knowing that silence protects reputation. Machiavelli understood that the appearance of virtue can be maintained without revealing all internal battles. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that the world admires overcoming adversity, but exploits active weakness. When your scars become internal fuel, you grow. When they become repetitive discourse, you define yourself by pain. And by defining yourself by pain, you open space for something even more dangerous, dependence. Because whoever needs another emotionally or financially inevitably relinquishes power, and that's where the next layer begins. Dependency is the most silent form of power transfer. When a man needs someone, financially, emotionally, or socially, he no longer negotiates, he silently begs. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, teaches that freedom of decision is born from autonomy. Machiavelli understood that loyal, one's own armies are superior to borrowed armies. The metaphor is clear. Those who depend on external forces live vulnerable lives. Decisions based on real human nature show that those who perceive their need begin to impose conditions. It is better to be feared than loved, but avoid being hated. and those who depend excessively rarely manage to avoid resentment. Calculated use of force begins with building one's own base. Virtù and fortuna favor those who prepare the ground before the battle. The appearance of virtue may mask submission, but reality always reveals who has the power of choice. Constant adaptability requires building independence before it is demanded. Consider the financial field. A man who depends on a single salary without savings or investments accepts any pressure. He works beyond his limits, swallows disrespect, and accepts subtle humiliations. Now imagine another who has built multiple sources of income: solid stocks, real estate funds, side businesses, skills valued in the market. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that choices create posture. Machiavelli would teach that the end justifies the means when the objective is strategic freedom. Your own loyal armies in this context are your skills, your investments, your strong network of contacts. It's better to be feared than loved, but avoid being hated, and that's easier when you're not desperate. Calculated use of force also means knowing when to leave the negotiating table. Virtù and fortuna favor those who can say no calmly, and saying no is impossible when you are dependent. In the emotional realm, the scenario is even more delicate. Those who desperately need approval, companionship, or emotional validation accept crumbs. Decisions based on real human nature show that neediness alters posture, voice, and gaze. Constant adaptability demands internal self-sufficiency before seeking external connection. Machiavelli would never recommend placing oneself in the hands of another without strategic guarantees. An appearance of virtue can hide a fear of abandonment. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, reveals that those who are emotionally dependent fear confrontation, avoid setting limits, and tolerate disrespect. Better to be feared than loved doesn't mean pushing people away, but rather not submitting out of necessity. Your own loyal armies, in this case, are your self-esteem, your inner circle, your discipline. Virtù and fortuna walk with those who build a solid foundation before exposing themselves. And when that foundation doesn't exist, something even more dangerous than dependence arises: the absolute lack of options. Without options, there is no negotiation. There is only disguised submission. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, teaches something simple and brutal. Those who only have one door open accept any condition to avoid being left outside. Machiavelli understood that having one's own loyal armies was synonymous with sovereignty. When a prince depended on mercenaries, he was vulnerable. Similarly, when a man depends on a single opportunity, his posture changes. Decisions based on real human nature show that scarcity weakens the tone of voice, alters the gaze, and reduces demands. It is better to be feared than loved, but to avoid being hated, and those who have no alternative often accept even being disrespected. Virtù and fortuna favor those who prepare before necessity knocks. Calculated use of force also means creating alternatives before urgency. Constant adaptability always requires having a plan B, and, if possible, C and D. An appearance of virtue can mask fragility, but the absence of options is perceptible. Think about the job market. A professional who only knows how to perform a single function becomes a hostage to their position. Now imagine someone who masters complementary skills: communication, data analysis, investments, negotiation, languages. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that versatility creates immediate respect. Machiavelli would say that the end justifies the means when the goal is to guarantee strategic autonomy. Your own loyal armies are your accumulated skills built over time. Decisions based on real human nature indicate that those who can leave the table are treated with more caution. It's better to be feared than loved, but always avoid being hated. And that's easier when you don't have to beg for space. Virtù and fortuna smile on those who silently build alternatives. A man who can choose is different from a man who has to accept, and that difference completely changes the game. Now consider the social and emotional dimension. Those who only have one group, one relationship, one single source of validation live under constant risk. Constant adaptability requires expanding horizons before the situation becomes dire. Calculated use of force includes knowing when to demonstrate that you have other options, even if they are only apparent. An appearance of virtue can be useful, but authority is born from the perception of autonomy. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, reveals that respect is not asked for. It is granted to those who can withdraw. Machiavelli understood that it is better to be feared than loved, but avoiding being hated, and having options prevents despair, which is the root of submissive behavior. Decisions based on real human nature show that those who are not dependent set the pace. Virtù and fortuna accompany those who build strategic silence about their vulnerabilities, and in the end, perhaps the true secret has never been to reveal strength, but to carefully hide what could be used against you. Now let me ask you a direct question. If someone wanted to manipulate you today, would they have enough material to do with it? Their reactions are exposed, their needs are visible, their traumas are well known, their dependencies are noticeable, your options are limited. Do you see the pattern? Politics, guided by reality, not ideals, requires the courage to accept something uncomfortable. The world does not reward naivete, it rewards strategy. Machiavelli never taught gratuitous coldness. He taught survival in competitive environments. Decisions based on real human nature are the foundation of lasting authority. Virtue and fortune go hand in hand with those who understand that silence is also power. The calculated use of force begins within one's own mind. Is it better to be feared than loved? Perhaps, but always avoid being hated, and that requires emotional intelligence and a firm stance. Your own loyal armies aren't just soldiers. They're your skills, your financial independence, your emotional stability, your quiet discipline. Constant adaptability is what transforms vulnerability into armor. So I ask you, are you living to be approved or to be respected? Is it reacting or observing? Is it exposing itself or strengthening itself? Silence about your vulnerabilities is not coldness, it's a strategy. If this content opened your eyes, don't let it end here. Apply, observe, adjust, build options. Start small, but start today. And if you want to continue learning about Machiavelli, power, strategy, and politics, guided by reality, not ideals, then subscribe to the channel now. Turn on notifications, because this conversation isn't for the naive. It's for those who want to understand the game before it's played. See you in the next video.